Richard Dawkins is and remains one of my heroes. Not that I have a particular great number of heroes, or that this means that much, but I find him to be articulate, witty, that he doesn't put up with bullshit very much. I like his writing. I think he could have had a passable career as a comedian if he hadn't been an evolutionary biologist. I mostly think well of him for a series he did ages and ages ago for Channel 4 about evolution, in which there were little sort of evolutionary images that developed over time, and by selection from a randomized group you could gradually shape it into something, so it showed the process of evolution that way. I also found his Christmas lectures way back to be very good as well, and since then I found his books to be brilliant. He's a very intelligent and capable man, but it's become fashionable of late to just lay into him at every turn, and this strikes me as being rather unfair. As an outspoken atheist, one of the remaining four horsemen, I think people have decided to try and bring them down a bit. I mean, Hitchens is dead, Dennett has largely escaped notice, and that really leaves Dawkins and Harris, both of whom have come in for really vicious attacks from people, and generally not on any genuine basis, just a kind of knee-jerk reaction to some out-of-context quote or tweet, or a couple of lines out of a book. In the case of Harris, it seems to have led to his harassment, if you'll pardon the pun. With Dawkins, it's his Twitter that seems to outrage people. 140 characters doesn't give you a lot of room for accuracy, but Dawkins, I find, because I do follow him, always places his tweets within context. He tends to explain and surround an individual tweet with other tweets that explain what he's talking about and why. But the reactions to what he says are always amusing, and you get the trolls, the crazier end of the Christian spectrum going after him all the time, and this crazier end of the Islamic spectrum going after him all the time. But what's been surprising is to see people who would characterise themselves as liberals going after him. Now, Dawkins is very much on the left, he's very much a liberal, but he's not politically correct. He's not one of these, they call themselves progressives, but I see very little progressive about the kind of things they argue for. And because Dawkins is pro-free speech and pro the old left and the classical liberal positions, he often finds himself butting heads with them on issues like free speech or over the issue of Islam. And because he disagrees with them, he then gets characterised as somehow being on the right. You see the same thing happen with Sam Harris, you see the same thing happen with Bill Maher in the States, and other outspoken, for want of a better term, classical liberals. What's happened with Dawkins is that as an outspoken atheist and a cantankerous old bastard, which is why I like him so much, he's become the target of the kind of unblinking social media eye of Sauron, in that anything and everything he does is or says is put under this microscope and examined in absolute detail and taken in the absolute worst way possible without any of the surrounding explanation or context or anything else. Now, I'm not saying he's infallible or that he's always right, or that even that he's a spokesman for atheism. You can't have a spokesman for atheism because the only thing that atheists agree on is that we don't believe in God. You can't even say all atheists are skeptics. Just look at the Atheism Plus crowd. Clearly, we're not even all skeptics. The only thing we agree on is that we don't believe in God. But Dawkins has earned his position as a spokesman because he's a rationalist, because he's a skeptic, because he's an atheist, because he's an evolutionary biologist. He's accomplished. He's earned his position, but it's not as a spokesman for atheism, it's just as a person who has earned respect and is capable of getting that media platform. But to misrepresent him constantly, to reinterpret everything he says in the worst possible light, does nobody any favours. And it's telling that these criticisms usually come in the form of accusations of misogyny or racism, whatever, and never ever seem to come with any kind of attached argument. There's almost never any substance to what's said. It's just, this is my interpretation of what you said, therefore you're now unpersoned. I understand why people might be tired of strident and militant atheists, like Dawkins, like myself, going on, but the problems remain. Nothing particularly has changed since 9/11. There are still issues surrounding religion, particularly Islam, it comes in for criticism, but Christianity too has its issues. Look at Africa and the promotion of anti-homosexual agendas in African governments, backed in large part by mega-pastors from the United States. There's still ongoing issues around the Catholic Church, and not just the typical child molestation issues, but plenty of other issues as well, political and social. Ireland is trying to legalise abortion at the moment, and that's going to be a struggle against the Catholic Church, who are definitely going to be working very hard against it. One particular issue that Dawkins has come in for a lot of criticism for was weighing in on the Clockboy fiasco, but all he really did was express some scepticism about what was going on, and if you have looked into the surrounding situation of that, it does smell a little sus. I wouldn't go as far as he has, and I would disagree with him on that, but the main thrust of what he was trying to say and trying to do, I think, was to counter with some scepticism the lionisation of this boy, which was just as bad in its own way as the racists on the other side. He didn't do anything particularly great. It was obvious that was going to be provocative, quite separate from anything else that goes on. Kids are being sent home for drawing pictures of guns during art class, let alone bringing in something that looks like a bomb and has wires hanging out of it and all the rest. There's reasons to be sceptical about that situation. Not to that extent, but there's reasons to be sceptical. But no, his commentary on that makes him somehow racist, just like all these other things. It is a concern that women are treated so badly in Islam. It is a concern that Saudi Arabia is now heading up the UN Human Rights Committee. These are things that we should be concerned about. All that's really going on here is that, like I said before, Dawkins is being watched with this weird absolute intensity and this utter determination to represent anything and everything he says in the worst way possible. And it's the same thing that's happened with Harris, and it's the same thing that's happened with Bill Maher, and it's the same thing that's happened with plenty of other outspoken secularists, skeptics and atheists. I understand you might be tired of hearing the same old, of seeing people opposed to religion, and I understand why you might mischaracterize that as racism and so on. But think. You watch Dawkins' feed, and when people react in this way to things that he says, the just furrowed brow, what the fuck is wrong with you, comes across without him even having to say it. So I'm going to say it for him. If you're jumping at everything he says, if you're misinterpreting it, if you're not bothering with the context, if you're not thinking, if you're not offering any rational, critical counter-argument, then what the fuck is wrong with you? This is another way that we can identify what's being called the regressive left. Pushing back against free speech, pushing back against genuine liberal and Enlightenment values, throwing accusations rather than making arguments, and it's going to continue to be a problem, I see, in the foreseeable future, and I hope more people will come to recognise this and start to argue back against it and demand that people prove their point rather than just throwing accusations, throwing shade, as the kids say these days. So, this isn't going to be a leave Dawkins alone video. It's just think. Go and see what he actually said in context. The tweets before and after, the people he was talking to at the time. Give him the same courtesy you would anyone else. Peace out.
You can keep up with what I'm doing at postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, which also has links to everywhere that I sell my products. You can also keep up with me on Twitter at Grimachu, and if you would care to support my work, you can support me at Patreon, again at Grimachu. Anything you give there will be used to better future further projects. Thanks.